everyone. Good morning. As chair of the Greater Dallas Foundation Education Committee, I want to welcome you to this morning's State of the Market breakfast. A big thank you to everyone in the audience today at Douglas Center and to all who are watching us virtually via Zoom. You are in for a treat as we've assembled a fabulous panel of experts in commercial real estate who understand the Greater Dallas market and represent the office, medical, and industrial segments of our industry. The past year has been challenging with a global pandemic, a winter storm for the ages, and much more. So our panel will have a lot to say. Don't worry, there will be plenty of time to answer any questions you have. Before I introduce our panelists, I want to recognize our subcommittee that put together today's program. Courtney Keebler, Colleen Burrows, and the Education Committee co-chair, Charles Kellis. Charles's company, ADM Security Solutions, is sponsoring the breakfast. Charles, do you want to say a few words?
I'm a man of few words. Good morning, everybody. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I know it's an early event, so we wanted to thank you again for coming out. We're excited to hear what the panel has to say, see what's coming up in the next few months in our industry. What I want to do is introduce myself to the folks that don't know me. My name is Charles Kellis. I'm the Director of Operations for the Dallas region for ADM Security Solutions. This is George Vincent, our VP for the Texas region. We're also known on the East Coast as Admiral Security. Admiral Security is a part of the Red Coast Company, family of companies. That's a family-owned organization, woman-owned business that includes Red Coast Janitorial, Data Watch Systems. You may have heard of those folks, the access control camera systems, Peel Real Estate Properties, and of course ADM and Admiral Security. We started Admiral Security in 1976. We currently have approximately over 5,000 employees in 15 states and the Washington, D.C. area. ADM joined the Texas market in 2018 and has offices in Houston, Dallas, and Austin. Sorry, getting nervous here. But what we bring to the table is a lot of experience. We have our own training academy. We have over 50 classes that we teach, including the ACE program, which is the program that's based on the Disney program and the Ritz-Carlton program on customer service. We try to train our staff to make sure that they're able to be the face of your property. We provide services to commercial property, industrial, manufacturing, energy companies, you name it, we're able to do it. If you have any questions, we have flyers on the table. We have our business cards, and I'll be happy to talk to you anytime. Thank you.
Before we get into introductions, I do have a few quick announcements. The BOMA Greater Dallas Young Professionals Committee is hosting the YP Bring Your Boss Happy Hour on Thursday, May 27th at 4:30 p.m. at Enno's Pizza Tavern in Coppell. Registration is free for real estate members and their bosses, and only $15 for allies. The Industrial Committee is putting on a lunch and learn on Tuesday, June 8th at Southern Botanical. The topic is sustainability and a whole health energy plan. And again, there's no charge to attend. If you know an industrial property manager who is not a BOMA Greater Dallas member, sign them up. A few more dates to put on your calendar. The next monthly BOMA Greater Dallas Luncheon is June 15th at Prestonwood Country Club. Our virtual coffee and chat with government affairs to recap the 2021 Texas legislative session will be on June 23rd. And remember, the call for entries for the 2022 Toby Awards opens on July 1st. We've assembled fantastic resources to help make it easier than ever to enter. For information or to register for any of the above events, go to BOMA Greater Dallas website at bomadallas.org and check out the event calendar. Let me remind you, this session is being recorded, so you can revisit the BOMA Greater Dallas YouTube channel. Now it's time to introduce our panelists. First off, we have J.J. Leonard. He's a managing director and partner at Stream Realty Partners. J.J. joined Stream Realty Partners in 2015 and serves as a managing director and partner for the Dallas office division. He is responsible for leading the strategic direction and operations of Dallas's office brokerage team and overseeing the DFW office portfolio, which is in excess of 14 million square feet. In this capacity, his responsibilities include leasing strategy properties for numerous stream clients and expanding Stream's leasing and overseeing Stream's 14.2 million square feet of DFW office portfolio. JJ possesses more than 20 years of commercial real estate experience in Dallas, represents some of the largest institutional investors of office properties in DFW, and has closed over 6 million square feet of lease transactions with an aggregate value of more than $1.3 billion. After graduating from the U.S. Naval Academy in 1995, served as an intelligence officer in the U.S. Marine Corps for 5 years, specialized in aviation intelligence and strategic targeting. Prior to joining Stream, JJ worked with Cushman & Wakefield, CBRE, and Capstar Commercial. Chase Tower, the Colonnade, Pinnacle Tower, the Apex, Preston Commons, Sterling Plaza, 1 MacArthur Ridge, and 3500 Maple are a few of the notable properties he has leased and or managed during his career. Our next panelist is Ben Husen. Ben joined HPI's Dallas leasing team in 2018 with a focus on office assets. He serves as a leasing representative for HPI's Dallas portfolio and third-party clients, ranging from institutional investors to local property owners. Prior to joining HPI, Ben played professional golf in the U.S. and South Africa, where he is originally from. Ben is actively involved in the community, serves on the board of Viola's House, and is a member of TREC and NACCAR organizations. Ben graduated with a BBA finance degree from Henderson State University, where he earned a golf scholarship. Banks Newton. Banks is first vice president of Lincoln Harris. His primary areas of specialty are medical project leasing, medical tenant representation, market analysis, and investment portfolio analysis. From 2010 to present, Banks has worked with clients such as HCPI, SRP Medical, Velocis, Methodist Health Systems, Baylor Healthcare Systems, MB Real Estate, the Dallas Cowboys, and more. Since joining the CSG group in 2010, Banks has been responsible for closing over 200 plus commercial healthcare transactions representing over 1 million square feet. Scott Moore, Chief Operating Officer and Management Partner at Holt Lunsford. Scott W. Moore, RPA, currently serves as the Chief Operating Officer and Managing Partner for Holt Lunsford. As such, he oversees approximately 72 million square feet of real estate with 160 employees in leasing, corporate services, management services, construction, corporate accounting, ITHR, promotional marketing, and real estate insurance company. Scott joined HLC in 2003 as a senior manager. In 2008, he was promoted to managing principal of management services and was instrumental in growing the company's management services business. As a result, Scott was promoted to Executive Vice President of Management and Corporate Services in 2014 and is currently serving as the company's COO. Scott began his real estate career directly out of college in 1987 with the Trammell Crow Company. His portfolio included Trammell Crow Center, which was the company's flagship building and one of the premier buildings in the Dallas market. He also worked in asset management, overseeing 6 million square feet and 50 plus employees for triple net properties with leasing and management teams in Florida, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Texas. Scott graduated from the University of North Texas and brings 33 years of real estate experience in management and corporate services, as well as asset management. Lastly, I want to introduce our moderator, Haley Collard. Haley Collard is currently responsible for the leasing operations and customer relations at Rosewood Court in Dallas. Additional tasks include the leasing and marketing for other Rosewood entities. Prior to joining Rosewood, Ms. Collard was responsible for leasing efforts for RM Crow's Dallas Fort Worth portfolio, consisting approximately of 1 million square feet of office assets. Ms. Collard graduated with a BBA in marketing from Texas A&M University. She's a member of the Real Estate Council, TREC, Associate Leadership Council class of 2014-15, and North Texas Commercial Association of Realtors and Real Estate Professionals. Haley, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Sheree. Thank you to BOMA for hosting this breakfast today. I feel lucky just to be a part of the discussion, and even happier that we are in person again. So that being said, we're going to start the conversation with everyone's favorite topic, which is COVID. COVID has changed the way that we live, work, play, travel, shop, and interact with one another. The pandemic's impact has on commercial real estate seems to vary based on product type. So we have a couple of different gentlemen here today that represent each product type. And so I'm going to ask them each, what impact has COVID-19 had on leasing demand in Dallas for your product type? We'll start with JJ and just work our way down.
Well, yeah, I think it'd be an understatement to say that the impact has been pretty dramatic in the office sector. We saw, I guess, last summer, we saw a drastic drop off in demand. Companies that were negotiating leases pre-pandemic, when the pandemic hit, I probably had 5 or 6 leases. One very sizable one that essentially died out for signature or close to it, that we've been negotiating for months. And so that was a little bit of a kick in the gut, obviously. And then you kind of had the spring and companies and people trying to figure out what's going on, but all the real estate searches were put on hold. And then the summer was the slowest summer that I've ever seen in my 20 plus years. Summer usually does slow down, but I think everybody decided they were going to go work from wherever else and weren't going to worry about their actual real estate. So everybody, for the most part, 95% of companies were working from home, and they certainly weren't about to make real estate decisions. And so we saw, it was really interesting, as far as if the rent rolls in your properties had a lot of roll in 2020 and 2021, the number of tenants that a lot of tenants decided to kick the can down the road for a year just to see what happens. But many let those leases lapse and decided to work from home and then wait to see what they needed, going forward. Did we even need as much space? How are we going to, what's it going to look like in the office when we go back? So all of those things have really affected leasing demand. I would say starting post Labor Day last year, we started to see small, mid-sized companies pick up in their search for real estate. We had some activity there. What we've really seen, I would say, starting in January of this year, announcement of the vaccines, obviously late last year, the vaccines coming forward, the COVID numbers, really plummeting dramatically. We've seen a major uptick in activity. I would say the last 3 months, it's been 3x from what it was 3 months ago. So are we at pre-pandemic levels? No, but I think we were talking about it in our team this week. We think we're probably 75 to 80%, which means that companies are not just the small and medium-sized companies, which we talk about later, versus the larger companies is a big difference, but they're all starting to come back and they're all starting to look for real estate again. So there is some pent-up demand. So that's a good thing.
Thank you. Thanks. How has it affected the healthcare industry?
Yeah, so just to preface, obviously on the healthcare side, a little different than office. So demand, the first 3 months after, the shutdown, they shut down all non-essential medical procedures. So most of those physicians' offices were closed. So any type of small leases we had during those 3 months that were either in negotiations or coming up for renewal, people kind of kicked the can on those. Probably starting this summer was maybe one of my busiest years of my career because the bigger groups, the hospital systems, the larger practices were out in the market looking for big space, looking for opportunities. So the demand for the smaller physicians was almost non-existent. The one-off solo practitioner that you might go see, he wasn't about to make any major real estate decisions because he was obviously scared of the future, but the bigger groups, the hospital systems, were taking sizable chunks of space. And deals we've been working on that right when COVID hit, yeah, they hit the pause, but then they were picked up back in June. So I would say the demand for the smaller tenants was low and it still hasn't come back. But I feel like the big groups found like this was a really good opportunity to get out there and take some space, do construction maybe while things were a little slow, And then, after that 3 months of, patients not coming in, I mean, people had back problems, they needed MRIs, they needed all these things that have been pent up forever. So, we came back to, full steam ahead much quicker than obviously office, just because of the nature of our business.
So demand for industrial has been great. We've had 11 straight years of positive absorption. 2020 during COVID was no different. The rental rates increased 30–40% during that time, and we returned to pre-pandemic norms. And so everything's been great for the industrial side. We have lots of growth, lots of development. We'll talk more about e-commerce and supply chains and things like that, but the demand has been great.
That's encouraging. Brad, you got anything to add?
So JJ, I think our stories will be pretty similar. So just closing the loop on office, I think 2020 overall was just devastating as far as just activity, transactions, and just kind of what tenants or customers were kind of predicting, or nobody could kind of plan from month to month or what the rest of the year looked like early on in 2020. 2021 has been a totally different story so far, and we'll discuss it more, but activity, transactions, and just people planning long term is definitely out there again. And the last kind of 90 to 120 days in the office market has been tremendous.
I think we're pretty lucky as Texans to be working in an environment where things are starting to open back up. And I just want to ask you all that with relation to Governor Abbott's strike force to open Texas, in which he's attempting to fully re-engage the economy, how do you think this will affect our real estate growth, specifically in DFW? Can you start, JJ?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I think we'd all agree that it's great to be in Texas, and it's great to be in Dallas. And I think a lot of other people, or other companies and other people across the country are agreeing with that, and are coming down to Dallas, to Texas, and even to the Sun Belt through Florida. It's really that area, and those states that have taken a more, I would say, aggressive role towards, or stance towards opening up. And Governor Abbott, obviously, he's been pro-business from the get-go. I mean, this whole last cycle, and he and his policies, I think, have helped, bring in the Toyotas and the Liberty Mutuals and the State Farms and some of those. So with the enterprise fund and everything going on there. So I think, the fact that he opened up early, the fact that he's got these different measures in place, I think it just bodes very, very well for our region. I think we are going to see a level. We actually are. I was talking to the Frisco EDC, I guess about 3 weeks ago. We had a meeting with them, and they were saying that essentially the demand that they're seeing now, the real demand, real requirements, is approximately 25% greater than it was before the pandemic hit. So companies are, and the companies that they're talking to, medium size up to very large, want to move quickly. I mean, they want to get into office space quickly, which is, in the past, to say, okay, we have a 3-year, 4-year horizon, we could look at developments. A lot of these groups are saying we want space that is either under construction and will be complete within 18 months, or space that's on the ground, because we're moving. So that's an interesting change in what we've seen in the past. And I think it's only going to be amplified as we go forward out of the pandemic.
Healthcare, do you think it's going to affect the healthcare growth?
Well, obviously, from a healthcare standpoint, even going back to Abbott, Texas, always been pro-business. So I think we saw a lot of that coming in with all the relocations. And then once COVID hit, hopefully none of y'all are trying to buy a house right now, but you can see the even residential market on, the lack of supply, the amount of offers, the amount of influx coming in from California, New York, even these companies that, people that work for Facebook that, they're like, hey, we're not coming back for the foreseeable future. A lot of people moved here. And as more people move here, there's going to be a higher demand for physicians, for delivery of healthcare. So obviously we're very optimistic that that's going to lead to more opportunities for DFW. So for us, yeah, obviously you look at the big corporate relocations, but even the number of people that are moving here, at some point, people are going to, these physicians that were in California and New York might say, you know what, there's better opportunity for me in Texas. So that's kind of how we look at it.
Makes sense.
Well, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but what I will say is that since March 10th, I think things have gotten better, and I think it's going to continue. You have to have a plan, and you have to do things, and so the governor's been proactive, and a lot of business leaders have been proactive, so I think it's going to help tremendously as we open up, people are vaccinated, all the things we've already talked about. What I do know is from my quarterly BOMA International phone calls with regional presidents, my update is typically far better, more optimistic than when I hear from the rest of the country and Canada. And so good things are happening in Texas, and we need to open up and we need to push forward, and I'm glad that we're doing that.
Yeah, just last thing I'd say, just things are changing daily, and it seems like everything's heading in the right direction. Positive news comes out almost every other day. I mean, DFW's led the nation 5 years in a row for just nominal population growth, and continues to be the epicenter for corporate reloads, and just all eyes seem to be on DFW. So I think just the outlook and just opening businesses up, just really positive.
All right, thanks. Talking about healthcare, as hospitals move medical cases into more cost-effective settings, are you seeing more leasing demand for off-campus space than on-campus space in Dallas?
I think that trend probably started a little before COVID anyway. Hospitals are always looking for the best way to deliver care to their patients. So if any of y'all had a medical procedure recently, or imaging, or a minor surgery, if you're going to your ACL, you're probably doing that now in a surgery center. So the hospitals have been trying to take some of the higher acuity off their campus anyway, which I think will probably protect them in another pandemic situation where their beds were overrun. I still think at the end of the day, on campus is everyone's bread and butter. There's only so much stuff you can move off campus, and we've already started that trend with urgent care, imaging, surgery centers. There's some specialists that have already kind of gone that direction. So I think yes, but I still think on campus at the end of the day is going to be the system's bread and butter. I just don't think it'll be the THR Presby Dallas model, or Baylor Bumsey model, or Medical City Dallas model, where those are just mega campuses. I don't think you'll see those recreated at Frisco, if that makes sense.
Sure. So it sounds like a lot of the trends in healthcare pre-COVID were already happening versus just because of COVID. But do you expect COVID to have any long-term changes on how health systems and physicians are utilizing their space?
I really don't, because in a healthcare environment, they're already very cautious on, people being sick in their buildings and waiting rooms. And I think if one thing they wish they wouldn't have done is they tried to get really efficient. They had small waiting rooms. So we had to accommodate some of those users that maybe needed more room in the common areas so that they didn't have that many people in a waiting room. But, hopefully we won't go through this again, and this will be short-lived, and, in 5 years, they won't think twice about how their waiting room is too small right now. So I don't think we'll see much of those trends change. I think maybe you'll see going into certain doctor's offices, you might now be required to wear a mask full time, or maybe in a hospital setting. I don't know the answer to that, but I've heard some doctors say that might be people's preference. So that's the only thing I can see.
Good insight. Future. So everybody knows that industrial is kind of the belle of the ball right now. So I'm going to let Scott talk a little bit about why exactly, what's driving growth in North Texas with the industrial market.
Yeah, so when you think about industrial, think about all the contents of your home, think about all the contents in your office, think about all the contents at your favorite retail center. All those contents are manufactured, stored, and shipped from warehouses. Essential businesses are tenants, they're owners of industrial. So when you look at that, there's a lot of storage that goes on with that now with the supply chains. You're always going to need food, clothes, toilet paper, so those things aren't going away, so that drove growth. E-commerce is a big driving force in what's going on with e-commerce. I mean, think about all the people that learned to shop online during COVID. They shopped online even more. And then think about old guys like me that didn't know how to shop online. I had to learn to shop online, and I did. And I like it now. And so I think that those are the drivers there.
So beyond the incentives that we've already mentioned, why are Texas and Dallas so attractive to investors?
Texas and Dallas are attractive to investors I would say, millennials are relocating to the Sun States at a record pace. Millennials are the future workforce. And so you have companies that will follow the millennials for sure. Then investors are going to follow the companies. And so Texas, as JJ was saying earlier and others were saying earlier, I mean, Texas is very friendly to business. You don't have a state income tax. It's a right to work state. There's lots of labor, lots of land, lots of availability. It's just a great place to be.
So with retail taking kind of a big hit during COVID, are you seeing any conversion space where retail is being converted to industrial?
Yeah, think about Walmart. Think about a standalone building like Walmart, and you have all the car parks and you have all the trailer storage there. And so here in Dallas, at 635 and 75, Walmart is converting a retail center into a fulfillment center. So that's a perfect example of it. You're also going to see obsolete malls that might be converted to fulfillment centers, data centers. They may, raise them, not raise them, but raise them, scrape them to the ground and redevelop it. And then you can think about like the design district and all the buildings that Mr. Crow built back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, the smaller industrial that are now retail. And so people in real estate are creative and they're resilient. And I think you'll always see conversion and reuses and reimagining properties.
That's encouraging for sure. I'm going to pick on my office guys for a second. I read a CoStar report recently that said DFW office market has reached a new high for available space, and that sublease space has reached over 9 million square feet. I know we're seeing signs that the office leasing is picking up in the area, but I want to ask, how has COVID-19 impacted the subleasing market? Ben, you want to start?
Yeah, so depending how you track it, I mean, the total sublease space available is between 7 and 9 million in the Metroplex, which is insane. So we really see it in certain markets, kind of more than others, uptown all the way up to Legacy. Just huge chunks of space that are kind of brand new, some of them furnished, that have just been just really accessible, and just people wanting to offload the extra space that they have never moved into or just don't need and want to get it off their rent roll. So it's really impacted, obviously, just direct absorption throughout the Metroplex, but I feel like it's stabilized. I think in Q4 of 2020, we saw a spike, but it seems like in 2021, that's somewhat stabilized throughout the various submarkets. So hopefully that trend continues.
Yeah, I'll just add to that it's been an interesting phenomenon with respect to sublease space. I mean, looking at and really studying the stats and the numbers and really mining the data, which we pride ourselves in and stream and really digging in. We are our research team. We don't have a research team at our company, and we are all the boots on the ground who write up our quarter report. And so, one of the things that we've seen with some of the sublease space out there is that a lot of companies, when the pandemic hit, they were all from home, they put their space on the market for sublease because, they're working from home, they weren't there. Let's see what, it's like throwing your line in the water to see if you can get a bite. We've talked to many tenant reps who have said that they're taking the spaces off the market for sublease if they haven't been subleased, and those companies are going back in and reoccupying those spaces. So we're going to see, I think we're going to see as this year goes on, that sublease number, get closer to normal. And I think that there are, in some cases, talking to Dan Harris and Randy Cooper and some of the folks who are over on our tenant rep team, they're saying that they have clients who they brought a subtenant to their sublease, availability, presented it, had a deal negotiated, and then the tenant said, essentially, I'm not interested. We're gonna come back to the office. We don't wanna, well, just we don't, just kidding kind of thing. So, and we ran some interesting numbers looking at sublease space as a percentage of available space and as a percentage of the total market, and compared DFW to the other major markets across the country. And we were near the bottom statistically as far as, and that's a good thing, meaning if you're at the top, you've got the higher percentage of sublease space like New York, out of control. But Dallas is literally in the bottom 3 or 4 of that list of about 25 to 30 cities. So you peel back the layers of the onion, it's not as bad. There's a lot of things with COVID that have been just weird anomalies with respect to numbers. Absorption is one of them, which we could talk about a little bit. But
So not only with sublease space, but just with the vacant space that you're seeing in the office market, are landlords offering incentives, or what are you doing to get out there and lease the space that's been vacant for some time?
So, Jay, I don't know if you've seen this, but rental rates are still up year over year across the metroplex, over 2%. So I don't think landlords are offering huge concessions as far as reducing rates. I think you see rental abatement maybe a couple more months added onto a deal. I think there's been a shift in kind of having move-in-ready space. I think it's what we're seeing in the last kind of 6 months, where people are now coming back to the market and they've kind of wasted some time essentially, and they're looking for space where they can just plug in and play and get to work immediately. So whether a space is built out already or if it's furnished, those are kind of like key drivers in transacting right now. So that's something that we're exploring in our portfolio, is furnishing spaces, having spaces wired, having Wi-Fi in place already. So these companies that they have 60 to 90 days to make a decision where they want to move and bring their workforce, we need to start offering those spaces available to them now as a landlord.
So who are those companies that are ready to get back into the office? What types of users are you seeing?
Yeah, we're really seeing all types. I think we saw initially, like I said, small, medium-sized companies who were based locally or regionally and can make autonomous decisions here and not worry about what their office is in New York or their C-suite in New York, Chicago, LA, whatnot, San Francisco, what they were doing, with respect to their office. And so, those medium and small businesses have of all types. We've seen insurance companies, accounting groups. We did have one, we saw the one corporate relocation, or it was actually a regional headquarters location for Caterpillar. That was a pre-COVID deal that came back to life in a big way, and they wanted to move forward very quickly, which they did, and Williams Square signed a lease out there for about 80,000 feet. So that's a good success story that we're already seeing. But yeah, I think that just echoing what Ben said about incentives, landlords are getting out there to attract these companies, and I think it really depends on whether it's kind of been a tale of two cities. So if you're a stabilized building, with 85 to 95% occupancy, not a lot of roll in the next year or two, you can do whatever you want. You keep your quoted rate, keep your incentives the same, keep, concession packages the same. And over here, if you're 60% leased, you've lost some tenancy and occupancy during COVID or prior to, and we're sitting on the sidelines, just essentially with all that vacancy. Now, any deal that comes along, those landlords are being a little bit more desperate with maybe dropping their rate some, giving quite a bit of free rent, giving really high TI packages just to get those tenants in the door and get some momentum. So we've seen both. But I agree that the rental rates really have, for the most part, stayed pretty flat.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. As we move out of COVID and into what we're calling the new normal, I'd like to just open it up to the panel and ask, what are the biggest concerns as well as the biggest growth potentials for each line of business? Thanks, you want to start?
Obviously, biggest concern is another pandemic. I don't think that's good for anyone. I think the obvious growth opportunities are out in the suburbs, Frisco, Prosper, even Argyle. I know that's starting to feel far out. If you talk to some of the health systems, they tend to be the first ones to acquire land. So if you somehow can follow them and where the land's going, that's typically they're trying to follow population growth. So, yeah, like even McKinney, which feels like it's already booming, it's still on fire. So I think some of those suburbs are really you're gonna see a lot more development out there. I think also some concerns that we have are on some of these mega hospital campuses like we talked about. I think they're tough for patients. It's hard to navigate. Think about if you're 85 years old, how hard it is even just to go to the grocery store, and then you're going to go to a hospital building with, 4 office buildings, large acute hospital. So I think there is some concern on those mega campuses, but I think long-term, everyone's still very optimistic, and that's driven by population growth.
Sure, there's definitely a lot of optimism coming out of this COVID market. Scott, anything on industrial?
Yeah, my concerns would be capital markets. Will interest rates go to 10 to 12%? If it does, that'll slow down or kill things. Construction costs have grown by $10 a square foot in the last year. If it continues to do that and gets out of control, that'll slow down or kill things. The new administration, not trying to be political, but they have some tax things that are out there on 1031s, capital gains, and other things that could slow things down, so that's a concern. As far as opportunities, I mean, Dallas industrial is now #1 in the nation. We've replaced LA and New York, and so that is just a huge factor there. And so the opportunities for us are big box, big bombers. It's been in the past, it's now, it's going to be the next couple of years. I mean, we did 6 developments last year, and when people were afraid in the first couple of months, we pushed forward, and then investors came back. We're delivering stuff now, and we delivered a building 4 months ago down in Houston, it's leased. And so we're going to do 5 to 10 more developments this year. We're going to do a big bomb, something like 1.5 to 2 million. And we have land and stuff on track to keep us going through 2023, as long as these things that we're concerned about don't stop us. So very optimistic.
That's great. What are the concerns on the office side for?
Well, I think the biggest concern right now is still just the questions about, for at least as I see it, the questions about working from home, how companies are going to handle that. I mean, I've read so many thought leadership pieces on that makes my head spin, because one will say companies have to come back to the office because they, and I'm an office guy, and I'm a glass half full office guy. And so anytime I have this conversation with anybody, it's very much, I have the whole party line, like, you can't have a culture remotely, you can't train your workforce remotely, the next generation of your workforce, you're going to be less efficient. IBM tried this 5 years ago before the pandemic. 3 years later, they brought everybody back to the office. It was a big failed experiment because their bottom line was affected by 30%. So I throw out all that, and I'm still uncertain, as are most of us, as to what the hybrid model looks like. Will that work? And I think what we're going to see is really probably a 2-year kind of shakeout period where, companies try different things. What works, what doesn't? Because we're kind of going into the unknown a little bit on how this is going to be effective, how it's not. They know that working from home has been effective for a period of time because it had to be, and B, because people working from home had nothing else to do. Now that you have a lot of, life's getting back to, I just say normal. I don't like the
New normal.
Yeah, exactly. Life's getting back to more normal, and so people have demands, and kids have sporting activities, and you have travel and all those things, and so they've already seen productivity drop off. So I'm obviously of the opinion that will be something that affects our business over the next 1 to 2 years. But I think in the long run, any decrease in the need for total space, let's say 10 to 20%, some of that will be offset by companies spreading out a little bit more in their space. And a lot of that will also be offset by new businesses moving into Dallas. So from a demand standpoint, I think within 1 to 2 years, we're going to see that normalize.
Great.
That's what I see as the biggest concern, maybe what you see as growth.
Yeah, so echo what everybody says here. Biggest growth potentials, just the amount of people and companies moving to DFW as a whole has just been staggering. On the flip side of that, just kind of the new supply that we have coming to market could pose an issue, like Jay just said, like 2-3 years down the road, especially in tighter markets like uptown, just where there was 6 to 10 million feet of planned new developments, where right now there's 1 million feet delivering end of this year. So I think 2-3 years down the road, we could see separate issues arise, but I think there will be good problems. There will be kind of navigating, just finding extra space for people to.
So Banks alluded to this on the healthcare side about submarkets around Dallas where we're seeing new development opportunities and who are being the most busy. So I'm curious on the industrial side, what kind of pockets of town are you guys developing in, and where are we seeing the most leasing being done?
Yeah, interestingly, Forney, Mesquite, Denton, and South Fort Worth. There's land, there's labor. And so that's what's attractive and that's what's going to drive it. When you think about Denton, Texas, I mean, you have 2 universities, you have a lot of employees up there. That town has been booming for the past, 20 years, but they're building 5,000 houses now. And so I would see that city doubling in size in a short time. And we're developing up there. We're looking at Forney. We're looking at all the places I just mentioned. I mean, Fort Worth is the same way. I mean, Fort Worth, obviously you have schools over there. You have lots of employees and things down in Crowley and other areas in South Fort Worth. So those are the submarkets that people are looking at and starting to move to.
And would you say, just tagging onto that, is there, for the amount of demand, is there equal supply?
Yeah, for industrial so far, I mean, for the last, like I said, we've had 11 good years, but in general, approximately, we're delivering 25 million and we're releasing 25 million, so everything's balanced.
Great. What about for healthcare and office?
I think right now, it kind of goes back to the big thing. I think the mega hospitals maybe have a little too much supply on their campuses. I think the demand in the suburban markets is they're underserved, but I alluded to this earlier, construction costs are getting really expensive. So to deliver a new product and then build out physician space is getting extremely expensive. And unlike, the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, physicians and hospital systems can really only make so much money. They are really tied to reimbursements. So yeah, we need more product out in those suburbs, but can we build it in a cost-effective manner to lease it? Because if you're $15 a foot more in Frisco right now building a new building just because construction prices are high, people are probably just going to say, you know what, I'll just stay in Flint. So we'll see how all that shakes out.
So Ben, on the office side, are you seeing demand in the suburbs like some of the other industry types, or is it more Dallas?
I think so. I mean, I think there's definitely been like a kind of what everybody's been throwing out is kind of the hub and spoke model. So everybody wants to have satellite offices in the suburbs. It's been really interesting to see kind of what's happening in Allen. I mean, that entire office market is just under 5 million square feet. And they've made some huge deals out there and new developments on the way. We just see things spreading out in all directions from kind of downtown Dallas, which is really exciting. So yeah, I mean, I think it's spreading out all over the place. I think downtown specifically has a ton of supply. So hopefully that trend starts to stabilize a little bit. We see more people taking bigger chunks of space down there. But yes, it's spreading out all over the place, especially north.
Yeah, it seems like the downtown Dallas supply has always outweighed the demand. So I don't think that's a COVID issue.
But yeah, I would say that something that is a recent interesting data point is Legacy Frisco, Upper Tollway, as we track it. The amount of supply there right now versus the demand, especially the last year, is pretty staggering. I mean, the market has constantly has led the Metroplex in absorption. Legacy Frisco has been 2/3 of our positive absorption dating back the last 20 years. So, I mean, it's obviously been a big driver for larger companies. Well, as some of those buildings have aged and some of those companies have opted for, newer space like Dr. Pepper, or they have downsized like HP and vacated, and then you have JCPenney. They accounted for over half of our negative absorption in the first quarter, and that's a big half. That's like 1.3 million. So there's a lot of big blocks of space in Legacy right now, and a couple of new developments that have been built and have delivered or are delivering. And so I think that for Legacy to get back to that 10% vacancy number that it was used to, 10 to 12%, we're going to have to see a lot of, which we will, a lot of the corporate relocations and the regional relocations really focus on Legacy, and we need that supply probably for the next 2 to 3 years to really uptick to fill that existing product.
I want to talk to Banks again on the medical office buildings. Are cap rates to acquire on-campus medical office buildings still lower than off-campus medical buildings, or is there no longer a price differential between the two?
A little bit of a loaded question. So obviously we're seeing some off-campus product, especially anchored by the healthcare system. So, you know, you have a Baylor Scott and White credit building off campus with a surgery center, imaging, primary care group. You know, those could trade similar to on campus. We're also seeing a massive influx of capital into healthcare. This probably started a little before COVID and now it's on fire. Tons of people are looking to place their capital in healthcare because they just found out not only is it recession proof, it's now maybe pandemic proof. So we're seeing a lot of buyers trying to get in, and the only way they can get in is to buy some of the off-campus stuff that's a little riskier, which is driving cap rates down. My big institutional clients, I think I can speak on their behalf. Their bread and butter all day is going to be to own that nice on-campus stuff, just because if there's a blowout of a tenant, it's going to be easier to backfill. And retention rates and on-campus MOBs in our portfolio is like 87%, which is pretty insane. So people like it for that.
Sure. Thank you. Kind of taking a turn now, talking about office leasing and, you know, we talked about what landlords were able to incentivize with, but on the other hand, what are the trends in office amenities? And what's the most important? What are customers looking for?
Do you think that?
Yeah, so I mean, as a landlord, I mean, you got to try and make the workplace kind of more inviting to tenants and their employees. So I think that is getting a lot of focus right now, where people need to be able to have more meetings outside of the office and need to be like, so this is, for example, so we just got done building this conference center a couple weeks ago. Turned out great, and it's just a great amenity for the project. So if tenants want to host small happy hours, now that we're able to do that, just having this easily accessible to them. Fitness centers, obviously a big kind of focus on health and wellness now throughout the building. So just educating tenants and employees about just kind of the new systems we have in place in office buildings now to accommodate this move back into the office, and just amenitizing correctly. So just tenant lounges, just to make the office experience more comfortable and easier for companies to recruit people back into the office, because now they have to recruit people from their homes to get back into the office place. So just having all kinds of amenities that cater to different kinds of employees and groups in your buildings is just crucial right now.
Okay. And then we've been talking a lot about corporate relocations and people wanting to come to Texas. So what infrastructure type companies will follow?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we've seen just like the Toyota effect and with other large companies that have come in. I mean, we've seen a plethora of new law firms that have, the big AmLaw 100 firms that didn't have a presence in Dallas that now want to have a presence in Dallas or have opened and established a presence in Dallas because they do business with all of these firms that are here. So a lot of those types of companies are taking note of, the population growth and the job growth and the corporations coming here. And then there's some ancillary companies, like Toyota, they thought it would be 2x of what Toyota's size was. And I don't think it ended up being that much, but I think there's certainly what was an effect with companies that wanted to be around, Toyota. And I think that will continue for sure.
I like that term. I think it totally works, the Toyota effect. The companies that follow. So there are a handful of new office developments that will deliver this year. Do you think that, first I'm going to ask you, what do you see are the biggest issues with new construction on the office side? And is that going to slow down the development for the future?
I'll just real quick say, and then you can chime in. I would just say that the new product that's delivering, that was already under construction, that's going to be delivering, post-pandemic, if you will. I think that new product, we saw a massive flight to quality this last cycle. So tenants moving to Class A space, very nice Class A space, well-located Class A space, because it was all about a fight for talent. Unemployment was near 3%, and so recruiting and retaining employees was much more important than the cost of real estate, because the cost of training them, the cost of paying them, the cost of losing them and having to rehire far outweighs the costs of real estate. So, you know, it's been a war between companies to make sure that they're in, you know, very nice space with nice amenities and whatnot. So I think these new buildings will be filled, especially those that are well located, because, you know, they'll be able to offer things like, you know, more fresh air intake, systems that can help keep the building clean, more outdoor amenities. You know, they're planning for that, right? So I think tenants will gravitate towards that. They'll be fine paying those higher rates. I think that on a go-forward basis, just what we've heard about the cost of construction, the cost of labor, and the unavailability of labor, I mean, I think that is all going to affect new office construction, which I'm fine with, you know? That's okay. And I know you guys want to keep throwing industrial up, and I think we should. But if it keeps it a little bit of a governor on the office side for a while, that's a good thing. And you know, but on the flip side of that, for interior finish out, you know, it's gonna affect pricing on that, which affects the economics of the deal, and ultimately, you know, what we can provide, landlords can provide tenants. So there's a balance there, you know, with construction pricing.
Sure. Ben, do you have anything to add to that?
Not much. I mean, I agree with everything there. I just think, you know, lumber prices up 3x. The access to steel and steel pricing is just kind of through the roof. So obviously these are all hurdles that hopefully stabilize. I think we've reached the peak in those prices, hopefully, and I think things will start normalizing now. You know, I don't think labor really is an issue, or I think it's a perceived issue right now. And again, I think that's also going to stabilize and kind of get to a normalcy pretty soon. And then just as far as interiors, just getting a permit from the city is just crazy right now and just so unpredictable. Sometimes it takes 2 weeks, sometimes it takes 12. And that's just really hurting some of the deals and just unpredictability of it all.
All right, on the industrial side, Scott, can you talk to us about the e-commerce and how it continues to drive demand?
Yeah, e-commerce has grown 3 times faster than brick and mortar since 2010, and it will continue to grow, continue to be relevant. You think about all the products that are out there, I mean, it's just amazing. You can go online and get practically anything that you want to get. And you don't have to get in your car and drive to the mall and have a rest and find parking spaces and, you know, go to 4 different places and burn 4 hours. You can sit back in your recliner, drink your coffee, you can order food, you can buy new shoes, you can get your golfing supplies, everything you want to get. Millennials love that. The elderly need that. Some of us aren't as mobile as we used to be. Some of us don't drive well in our old age. And so that's really relevant, and e-commerce is going to continue to drive demand for industrial.
And what about new design features in industrial? Are there any demands for that?
Yeah, new design features are interesting because we're not as glamorous as office, and so it's things like clear heights. We've gone to 40 feet, which is a big deal. You're even seeing it in smaller buildings. 200,000 square foot buildings have 40-foot clear height. With that, you have higher vacuum systems, which means you're storing more, which is what you're trying to accomplish, which means you have more weight. And so one of the design features is you have thicker slabs. Instead of 6 inches, you have 8, 9, 10, whatever's needed to, and, you know, to hold that weight and everything. Again, not glamorous. When we were talking about Walmart, you're talking about the car parts. You need tons and tons of car parts. You need the trailer storage. And then the big thing that's interesting changed is this: for decades, you didn't have HVAC in warehouses. I mean, there's a rare occasion when you had some. You think about the big fans that you see that are out there, and they blow down hot air on you. You open up all your dock doors and try to get a cross breeze going, and that's the way it's been. Well, you know, historically, it's been these companies wanted to pay as little rent as they could, but that's changed. Now they're willing to pay more to get higher TI packages so they can have heavy HVAC and have heating. And so if you had a choice in Texas to work in the summer in one that had a fan or one that had HVAC, what would you pick? So those are the changes for industrial.
All right. Just wrapping up, I'm going to ask each of you to describe where do you see your product market type in the next 3 to 5 years. Go ahead, JJ.
I'm very optimistic. I said it before, so I broke my record a little bit, but I'm very optimistic on Dallas, very bullish on this region, on Texas, and directly, like I said, those markets throughout the Sun Belt. I think we're going to see a realigning of population. We're already starting to see it. That's going to bode very, very well for us. And so in 3 to 5 years, I think we're going to see activity, leasing activity, demand, and probably then followed by new construction, far outweighing what we saw in 2019, which 2019 was a very good year for the office market here. Actually, the 5 years preceding that were very good years too. But I think we would be at, or, you know, I would say a 10 to 20% above activity level from where we were in 3 to 5 years. But yeah, 1 to 2, no, but 3 to 5
Take a
years.
little bit longer. Ben, while we're talking about office, do you have anything, any projections?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just a dumb leasing guy, but I'm very bullish in office and just excited with where things are going. And like JJ said, 3 to 5 years out, it's really exciting to see, I think, what will be happening in the city then. We talked about e-commerce. I think, you know, the alternative to retail is e-commerce. There's no real alternative to office, working in the office, like working at your dining room table, which is not really viable. So I think the long-term outlook is really optimistic. And interesting stat, a year ago, they interviewed CEOs across the country. 87% of them said they would reduce their footprint or offer flexible workspace to their employees. We conducted the same survey last month, and 19% of those CEOs said they would reduce their footprint or have flexible workspace. That's a huge shift, and I still think we're navigating choppy waters and still trying to figure it all out. But like I've said numerous times, everything seems to be heading in the right direction. I'm super optimistic for the future.
Good, that's encouraging for us office folks. Thanks. How do you see the healthcare industry over the next 3 to 5 years?
I think you're gonna see more institutional buyers enter the space, big pension funds. I think they'll decide maybe that this is more brain damage than it's worth. It's a little more complicated than running just your typical office building, but I think people are gonna look at the stability of it and like to mix it in with their portfolios. So I think that's not going to change. And then I think over the next 3 to 5 years, the health systems are really going to push out into the market to deliver healthcare services to those suburbs and not rely so much on people driving from Frisco downtown. So I think the health systems will make a very concentrated effort to deliver healthcare to the consumers where they live. And that is probably a newer trend over the last decade.
Scott, are we going to see the industrial continue to trend positive?
Yeah, I agree. I'm optimistic. I mean, we live in the greatest country, in the greatest state, in the greatest city, and we're blessed. And we've had 11 great years on the industrial side, and I think we'll have at least 3 more. And so I'm very optimistic about it. And beyond that, I'm not sure. I mean, all those concerns that I listed are concerns. And so if those concerns stay in check and the administration doesn't raise taxes, and, you know, capital markets are good, and construction costs are favorable, then yeah, we're going to have some good years coming.
Great. Well, I think that wraps up our panel discussion. Thank you guys all for your insight, and thanks again to BOMA for having us.
Thank you.
We do want to open up the floor for any questions for our panelists. So following that, does anybody have any questions about what they've seen and about how they may feel a certain market may be affected, or what these guys know about?
I actually have 2. You spoke earlier about amenities and things like that in office buildings. And I was just curious, with prospect tenants, are you guys seeing a lot of focus on the efforts within the building, the cleaning efforts, you know, post-COVID? Are y'all seeing a real big push on that, or is it just kind of about the same prior to COVID? Because I know you said new construction for sure, but I wasn't sure about existing buildings.
Yeah, I think for existing buildings, I mean, so much of Dallas was built in the 80s and 90s. And so, you know, what can be done to make tenants feel safer, you know, using fitness center, going to cafe, working in their space, taking elevators, things like that. I think, you know, just because for the last 15 months, we've been, you know, masked 6 feet apart, only 4 people in an elevator standing on the little things. And you know, so I think that there's going to be some of that for the rest of this year, where tenants are very large and small are looking at, you know, what are landlords doing? What are filtration systems cleaning? What fresh air intake, you know, can you have? And how does that the more you can, I think, put that down on, you know, in a format that the tenants can understand, and digest, the better off I think those landlords will be because they're being proactive. And I think that, you know, if a tenant tours 6 buildings and 2 of them really talk about everything they're doing to make it, you know, a clean environment and with all of those extra things that can be done, and 4 don't, and I think those 2 are at an advantage in that respect.
And then my other question was, are you guys seeing landlords compensate for increased construction costs with the TI dollars? I was just curious about that one.
Well, I mean, we've seen, across our portfolio, we have seen landlords be willing to give more, you know, in TI for sure. And I think that's just, you know, a lot of it is because of construction costs, but a lot of it is just to try to gain the tendency for that building to make a lease. So it's kind of both.
So are the tenants more willing to pay the higher rates for the more TI? Is that more of the pattern you're seeing?
In a nice building.
Okay.
Yeah, in Class A. Really, I can't, I mean, 95% of the absorption in the last 6 years is Class A.
Thank you.
Mike?
I heard all of you allude to it, but you've got the North Tollway Marketplace in Frisco and beyond, you have Prosper, Allen, places like that. None of these have mass transit to it at all, but how difficult is it going to be for those developments? You know, we hear about this pipeline of development that's coming in up there in all those markets, all those municipalities. How are we going to get property support to them? And I'm talking about the landscapers, the janitorial, the day maids and porters, things like that with no mass transit. Is that going to have an effect on the way we manage properties going forward? I mean, and it's going to be hard for them to live up there. I mean, I just saw a news report last night with Jen Lady about the price of housing. You know, the $500,000 and $600,000 housing, you're having to pay $300,000 more, you know, bidding war, things like that. I mean, the support can't live there. They're going to have to drive there or get there in some fashion. How is that going to affect how we manage properties?
I mean, it can be a problem. I mean, when you look at South Dallas, when they first started doing industrial years back, you had buildings sitting empty because they went out there and started to start building and you didn't have the infrastructure in place to support it. You didn't have people there to support it. And what I mean by that is that you had those buildings and you didn't have the rooftops to have the labor supply. Right. So they just sat there empty and people panicked. And so then they started lowering their rents and cutting concessions. So I saw this in Florida when I did asset management there, is that like in Naples, everybody had to come in from Fort Myers. And so your costs go up. So what happens is that you have to pay people more money for travel and things like that. So it increases your operating expenses because you will have trouble getting those companies in.
Shane?
Well, first off, Ben, based on your bio, can I lock you in on the BOMA Dallas alternative? Your skills by being there.
Absolutely.
But probably more for Ben and JJ. I've always been a downtown guy, so I was down there when at 5 o'clock everybody ran out of town and tumbleweeds would come through. And with it really picking up, does the hub? I'm afraid the hub and spoke is going to put it back. And I mean, it just seems like I don't think people really like working from home as much as they enjoy not having to drive so far to work. So it makes sense that companies would say, hey, we'll just have an office in Rockwall, we'll have one in Frisco, we'll have one spread out rather than having 100,000 square feet in downtown. Do you feel like that's going to happen, or do you think downtown's far enough along that it's going to be okay?
You know, we both lease in downtown and are active down there. The office down there, the HPI office is down there. So yeah, I'm a believer in downtown. I don't think that the hub and spoke with respect to companies having multiple offices in different suburban cities is really a trend that's going to be prolific amongst a large number of companies. There may be a few who can do that just based on the type of work that they do. But otherwise, I think we've already seen like the Arts District have a resurgence thanks to, you know, the park. And then we're starting to see, because as more people have moved to downtown, you know, when I started down there as a property manager in 2000, 2001, when we met, you know, it was a 9 to 5 market and tumbleweeds afterward. But now you have 12,000 residents who live down there, and more coming, and you got the East Quarter filling in. So being down on Main Street, Commerce in that area, you know, it connects to Deep Ellum on the other side of East Quarter. So we've seen a lot of demand at Comerica Bank Tower, for example, which is in the core, which has been, the core has kind of been the stepchild to the rest of Arts District and Uptown. So, you know, I'm a believer in downtown. I really am. I think that it's becoming more vibrant. It's becoming more of a live, work, play market. I mean, I remember when I wrote an article for, was it like the Black Sky? Do you remember that? Yeah. So I wrote a piece talking about how Uptown had just gone over 10,000 apartment units, and how big of a deal it was in 2003 or whatever. And you know, downtown's past that now. And downtown will continue to grow. And you've been down to the National and seen Thompson and seen Monarch and some of those, you know, new. I mean, it's cool. There's a lot of money, and the city's being really smart about putting dollars into those older buildings. They haven't been converted to residential, converted to hotel, you know, replaced. So I'm bullish on it.
Yes, ma'am.
With companies still kind of navigating their return to office with the leasing activity that is taking place, do you see a lot more requests on the tenant side for different encumbrances and more rights to first offer or refusal?
I think so, yeah. I mean, just transactions seen this year, there definitely is that, just kind of securing potential growth for them in the next kind of couple of years. We're definitely seeing an uptick in that for sure, and we're offering that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. This question is for banks. With respect to the healthcare market, we have offices in San Diego. We're seeing like a big push in biotech there. Do you see some of that moving into DFW, given the pool of talent that's here locally?
Unfortunately, it feels like we're behind Houston there. So the big, we kind of call life science, seem to be the Bay Area, San Diego, Boston, and now Houston. We've looked at it a lot, and we just haven't seen the commitment to DFW. I think eventually it'll be there. But right now, if you're not familiar with Houston, they have the world-class healthcare in Houston. So it just makes more sense for some of that research to go there. But it's definitely the Bay Area, Boston, Houston, and hopefully we'll see that. Because I think those are great companies to have here.
Marjorie?
We've done a lot of office commercial leases recently, and not one of them has asked for UV lighting, air quality, MERV 13 filters. Are you seeing the same thing in the market? Has anyone asked for you to upgrade anything?
I think we've seen, so there's a lot of the smaller companies don't care, you know, they just want to get back to work and you know, get things back to normal. You know, some of the larger companies, because they're, you know, like I said, making decisions in other markets, and they're looking at it as a one size fits all across the country. We get these big RFPs from them that talk about, you know, what are you doing with respect to COVID? I don't know how long that's going to last. I mean, the farther we get, hopefully, away from this, and the more back to normal we get, you know, I think that we'll see less and less of that.
I mean, they're asking, what are you doing? But once you tell them, they don't go any further.
Yes, sir.
This question is for Scott. Scott, what do you think the short-term, long-term impact is going to be of this supply chain disruption that we're seeing right now in commercial?
I mean, obviously they've learned some lessons, and so they're holding more, and so that's increasing demand. And then you have people holding more to avoid tariffs. I think, does that kind of answer what you're asking?
Do you have any perspective on how long you think it may last? As we're hearing months on some products like steel decking, roofing materials.
Oh yeah, I think, yeah. I mean, my best guess is 6 months.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
For the office guys, on the corporate relocation, we've seen a lot of that, not just to Dallas, but to Texas in general. Do you think that slows down as other states reopen? I mean, obviously, we were at the forefront of that. Do you think that slows down, or do you think that momentum picks up as we kind of move out of this?
My quick answer to that is it won't slow down. It will pick up, and it'll, I think we'll see it pick up, and see more demand than we did pre-pandemic because of the pandemic. Not only is there pent-up demand that we're seeing now, but there is new demand that companies that weren't thinking about relocating that now are like, I need to get out of New York. I want to move where I have, more affordability, less restrictions, and I can have a house with a backyard. And so all of those things are becoming more important to companies and to people.
I think that trend was happening pre-COVID also. And I think COVID and everything we've gone through in the last 14 months just accelerated that. And I think that's going to continue.
Is there any more questions for our panelists? Well, if not, I want to thank again our moderator, Kaylee. Thank you very much, panelists. Y'all did an amazing job. I also want to acknowledge our sponsor, ABM Security Solutions, which provided today's breakfast. Also remember, summer's coming up, but BOMA Greater Dallas has a full calendar of events. Make sure you read your e-voice and our alerts. Visit the website and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Hope everybody has an incredible day. See you again soon.